Educated adults subjected to thousands of hours of preschool television inevitably begin applying postgraduate level critical theory to animated dogs and anthropomorphic kids. To understand exactly how this psychological state operates, researchers isolated a corpus of 106 high-engagement posts from the digital community r/DanielTigerConspiracy. They evaluated the archive using a 10-metric authenticity rubric, measuring variables like structural ambition, viewing hours evidence, and suffering signal, to separate performative jokes from genuine cognitive breakdowns. This chart shows the highest scoring artifact. With a score of 26 out of 30, one parent produced a comprehensive structural deconstruction of the Paw Patrol universe. This filter isolates the results of a starved adult brain hallucinating rigid sociological structures to survive cognitive captivity. That apex Paw Patrol theory constructs an airtight investigative frame. It argues that the titular pups are a heavily militarized, privatized police force funded by corrupt municipal tax diversions. The parent recognized over multiple seasons the structural absence of state-funded EMTs or sanitation workers, eventually concluding that Mayor Goodway's regime suppresses public services while using merchandise sales to launder their money. The second highest finding turns its focus to Daniel Tiger's neighborhood. Scoring a 25, this theory points out the temporal impossibility of a single teenager, Prince Tuesday, acting as the town's grocer, crossing guard, lifeguard, and babysitter. It posits a dark Faustian labor monopoly, suggesting either penal servitude or an army of suppressed clones. Tied with that score is a grim reinterpretation of PBS's Dinosaur Train. Rather than an educational ride, one viewer maps out the show's temporal mechanics and concludes the train is a time trap. The Advanced Transit Authority discovered the impending KT extinction event and now loops the dinosaur populace endlessly in the Mesozoic era to prevent mass panic. These frameworks sound absurd, but the comedy is entirely accidental. It is a byproduct of genuine, inescapable suffering caused by the modern social contract of parenting. We can map why some shows trigger intellectual theories while others trigger clinical distress. The graph reveals a stark inverse relationship between sensory aggression and theoretical ambition. At the bottom right sits the lowest theoretical tier, dominated by hypersensory properties like Cocomelon. Parents do not attempt to explain the fictional world of these shows. Instead, their language shifts to epidemiological incident reports. They utilize clinical addiction terminology, describing their children as sober or reporting the specific brain rot caused by the audiovisual frequencies. On the opposite end of the spectrum, sitting at the top left, are properties like the vintage franchise Thomas and Friends. Here, the community zeroes in on the island of Sodor's authoritarian setup. They produce comprehensive Marxist critiques of labor exploitation, pointing out that the sentient working-class trains are kept in perpetual terror of the scrapyard if they fail to maximize their utility. A show must enforce a sterile, rigid vacuum to provide the scaffolding necessary for adult deconstruction. Pure sensory noise offers no structural purchase. These complex conspiracy frameworks serve a secondary psychological function. They act as an alibi for sublimated macroeconomic anxiety. Look at the theories surrounding Bluey. Parents try to solve the wealth discrepancy of affording a multi-million-dollar Brisbane home on the salaries of an archaeologist and an airport security guard. The prevailing community conclusion is that the couple operates an international antiquities smuggling ring. A similar audit is applied to Spidey and his amazing friends. Viewers notice the low-stakes crimes and reframe the villain Rhino as an unhoused individual suffering from severe food insecurity within a post-scarcity economy. Modern parents project their own generational exhaustion directly onto these fictional worlds. The obsessive analysis of gig economy labor reflects intense millennial anxiety regarding inaccessible housing and vanishing social safety nets. The alibi drops completely during the discourse surrounding the episode The Sign about avoiding a move. Military families, who cannot magically opt out of traumatic relocations, reacted viscerally to the wish fulfillment. Some banned the episode entirely to avoid explaining painful real-world realities to a 3-year-old. Communities like r/DanielTigerConspiracy transcend media fandom.
They function as essential group therapy apparatuses for adults to process the collateral damage of domestic life. The primary professional misconception surrounding these artifacts is the assumption that they are simply performative, daytime internet humor crafted for upvotes. To test the genuine nature of this involuntary expertise, researchers applied contrarian hypothesis testing directly to the text. The first hypothesis proposed that bad shows generate good theories. The data disproves this. Caillou is universally reviled, yet it yields mathematically shallow, punitive fantasies. Meanwhile, Bluey, praised for its cinematic quality, generates some of the densest economic theories in the archive. The second hypothesis proves accurate. The most ambitious theories are actually generated during the cognitive window of late-night sleep-deprived exhaustion. The textual evidence for this sits in the grammar itself. Posts start with formal academic structure and descend into grammatical drift, often abruptly begging for release, with one parent pausing a Mesozoic timeline to state a desire to physically remove my television from my home. This visualizes the epistemological function of cognitive depletion. Physical exhaustion severely degrades the protective barriers of basic logic, allowing the subconscious to connect disparate data points that a rested mind would instantly dismiss. In this state of depletion, the mind bypasses logical constraints, linking cartoon supervillains with untreated food insecurity, because the internal editor that would dismiss such a correlation is no longer functioning. There are specific pockets of the media landscape that the community circles obsessively without ever reaching a unified consensus, creating under-theorized territories. The primary case study for this is Carl's Car Wash, a property in the Super Simple Songs universe. The community is deeply fixated on Carl's completely irrational, generic token pricing structure. A massive semi-truck might cost 10 tokens, while a tiny clown car costs 17. Theorists propose conflicting frameworks to explain this, ranging from a Marxist Robin Hood model subsidizing the working class to a dark Lovecraftian entity passing arbitrary judgment on souls. The frustration over Carl's arbitrary metric of medium messy versus super-duper messy directly connects to the hidden costs of real-world childcare and healthcare. These unresolvable media anomalies strike the deepest parental nerves, precisely because they mirror the exhaustion of navigating arbitrary bureaucratic rules and irrational billing systems in actual adult life. The absolute peak of this phenomenon manifests as cross-show fluency, an analytical state achieved when a caregiver survives consecutive eras of different media properties. This timeline represents a unified cinematic universe. One prominent theorist constructs an evolutionary history where the militarized Paw Patrol era precedes a cataclysmic human eradication event, which eventually gives way to the canine post-scarcity utopia of Bluey. To support this timeline, users point out that a character in Bluey sings an ancient nursery rhyme about one man and his dog, suggesting humans have been entirely relegated to ancient myth. A secondary comparative framework reconciles the chaotic, physics-defying geology of Peppa Pig by diagnosing it as the post-apocalyptic fallout of magical warfare waged in the adjacent Ben and Holly's Little Kingdom universe. As the caregiver is subjected to years of consecutive programming, the brain synthesizes a unified field theory to maintain internal continuity and psychological sanity. This brings us to the core meta-research question. Are these hyper-detailed theories just a coping mechanism for domestic drudgery, or an unrecognized form of genuine human attention? Culturally, parental viewing is dismissed as low-quality or distracted attention, but the staggering architectural integrity required to map out these complex theories proves something miraculous occurs under enforced boredom. While managing domestic labor and physical safety, these adults execute remarkable cognitive feats. They map time travel paradoxes, parse background dialogue about tick shampoo, and perform audits of municipal budgets. The resulting involuntary expertise represents the adult mind forcing a flat, sterile narrative loop to bear the weight of a complex reality. The evidence suggests that when the adult mind is trapped in the dark, watching the same episode for the 47th time, it chooses to construct a terrifying, complex world in the absence of one.